Hey girlies, welcome back. I hope you've managed to stay consistent with your lessons and build the muscle memory necessary before arriving here, because we'll be putting it to test very, very soon. During this section, you will soon reach a female passing voice. However, this portion of your training is also where errors and subtle imperfections are most easily formed. If those mistakes are allowed to develop into muscle memory, they can become difficult to correct later. With that in mind, I strongly suggest using the feedback system whenever you feel uncertain or struggle with an exercise, so that any mistakes can be identified early and corrected before they become bad habits. With those disclaimers out of the way, I hope you've brought a little water, because it's time to begin. Phonemes are the distinct sound components that make up words and separate their pronunciation from others. It may not be immediately obvious, but there are often subtle differences in how masculine and feminine voices produce language. Most masculine voices tend to sound largely monotone, for example. This is, of course, an exaggeration, but there is generally some truth behind the idea. While masculine voices are not truly monotonous, they often use less pitch variation, with inflection being largely absent unless it has been specifically trained. Feminine voices, on the other hand, tend to use much more inflection. They move across a wider range between lower and higher pitches, and that variation is one of the defining characteristics of feminine speech. That inflection is primarily focused on the vowels within a word, the vowel phonemes. And that is exactly what we will be focusing on in this lesson. Please write down the following. Take some time to familiarize yourself with this list of vowel phonemes. Focus specifically on the first 3 words from each line and practice each of them a few times. They are simple words with simple meanings. For the next step, we're going to begin in familiar territory, monotone C4, just as you've been practicing in the first steps of the tutorial series. I want you to go line by line and read the first 3 words from each line in monotone C4. Once you have read the line, read the next, faster and faster. I'll give a quick demonstration of the speed necessary for this to work. Cat, plaid, laugh, bay, maid, way, and bread, bury, bee, meat, lady, England, women, busy, sky, night, pie, swan, mall, thought, open, moat, bone. Now comes the fun part. As you read line by line, faster and faster, your mind will eventually begin relying almost entirely on muscle memory to form the words. That is exactly what we want, because we are going to take advantage of that for your very first inflected words. The goal is to have your body use the training you have developed so far as the foundation for the new way you're going to speak. In a sense, we are going to trick your body into doing it at first, and then allow it to become more familiar naturally over time. So now, as you continue reading faster and faster, I want you to read down the line, then jump back up to the top, and say the first 3 words with inflection. Do not recalibrate. Do not stop to think. Do not pause. Do it on instinct. Move directly from reading quickly in monotone to reading the words with inflection. Cat, plaid, laugh, bay, maid, way, and bread, bury, bee, meat, lady, England, women, busy, sky, night, pie, swan, mall, thought, open, moat, bone, cat, plaid, laugh, bay, maid, way, end, bread, bury. As you inflect, I want you to raise the pitch of the vowels. Remain in chest voice, but push the inflection upward around an E4 and M1. Every single time, shift your focus of pronunciation towards the vowels and the sounds that they create. Spend less time and effort on the consonants. You will need to inflect higher than what feels comfortable or normal for you at first. That will not feel familiar yet, and that's expected. Continue this process of reading with inflection until you either begin to grasp the sound or the inflection and foundation start to slip away. If that happens, return to the earliest steps to rebuild it. Start in monotone C4, read, increase speed, switch to inflection again, and force the central vowel higher in pitch than the rest of the word. Spend less time on consonants and more on vowels. Cat, plaid, laugh, bay, made, way. This is an example of having the consonants shortened but the vowels lengthened. The difference is in the consonant. What I want you to think about when I say shorten the consonant is essentially say the vowel, just the vowel. Imagine the word without the consonant. For example, bay. Just say a and then rhyme it with the word. So it's a nice bright phoneme, and then quickly make it the word bay. So bay. Just barely say the B. Just barely pronounce it. As opposed to bay or made, way. You hear the difference in how much time I'm spending on the front? It's more important to elongate the length of the word. The ending of the word is what's important here. Additional note, as you're inflecting the vowels, I want you to temporarily tighten your squeeze even further during the inflection of the vowels. What I mean by this is that when you are inflecting, you're not simply raising the pitch. You also want to slightly reduce the size of the pharynx, creating an even smaller resonance space specifically during the vowel sounds. This is especially important during the darker phonemes. Think of sounds like O's, U's, R's, and Oo's. During these vowels, squeeze the resonance slightly tighter in order to brighten the sound, to bring it into, equilibrium with the rest of the other vowel phonemes. Try to listen closely. I'm going to try to demonstrate the difference between squeezing extra tight on certain vowel phonemes and not. Open, moat, bone, wolf, look, bush, lug, blood, monkey, who, do, blue. I want you to make these sound like this. Open, moat, bone, wolf, look, bush, lug, blood, monkey, who, do, blue. Now that you've learned the basics and have begun working with inflection, we're going to introduce a new practice tool. You can use many things for this: books, comic books, road signs, items on your desk, and so on. However, I prefer to use a particular website that generates practice words, sentences, and phrases. randomwordgenerator.com includes all of these tools in one place. For this tutorial series, I'll be giving instructions with this specific website in mind. There are others like it, but for now, we'll use the examples from this particular tool. Set the syllables to 1 and word count to 6, then generate a set of words. You'll be using these generated word sets for practice from this point forward. The same rules apply as before. Each vowel should be inflected higher than the rest of the word, and your emphasis should remain on the vowels rather than the consonants. Continue this process until you feel confident that your vowels are consistently being inflected correctly. I recommend beginning with overinflection, then gradually adjusting it later. This helps establish the habit of using inflection early in the process. Once you're confident that you have a good grasp on the vowels in single-syllable words, increase the syllables to 2 per word. At this point, you'll need to introduce a new rule into your practice. Generally speaking, whatever you do to the first vowel, you must also do to the second vowel in equal measure. There are exceptions to this rule, and those have to do with the darkest vowel phonemes I mentioned earlier. Those phonemes need to be overcompensated to make them sound equal to others. Extra note: there is a feature on this website that I particularly like when generating random words. For the next step of this tutorial, whenever you see a word that has sexual connotations, sounds lewd, or even slightly inappropriate, press the heart icon beside it to add the words to the favorite section. I'll explain why later. Let's use a few words for examples to try to get your syllables and phonemes to match. Basin, publish, terrace, lawyer, campaign versus basin, publish, terrace, lawyer, campaign. As you increase the word size and syllable count, that same rule we mentioned earlier becomes more and more prominent. You need to spend more of your speaking time on vowel sounds and less on the consonants. What I want you to pay attention to is how long you spend on consonants compared to how long you spend on vowels within each word. Shift your focus even further towards the vowels. In practice, you will barely articulate the consonant sounds. You should only produce them clearly enough for the listener to recognize the consonant, and no more. All remaining time should be spent on the vowel sounds and the inflection of those vowels. Additionally, shift your focus from the beginning of the word to the ending. The end of the word is the last thing the listener hears. When speaking with a raised larynx, it is important that you do not allow the larynx to relax until after the final sound of the word has fully finished and is no longer audible. If you relax too early, people will hear the movement of the larynx as the word finishes. They will hear the resonance enlarge and the sound deepen. This is what I mean when I say make sure your larynx is held up all the way through to the ending of the word. Here's an example of doing it correctly and an example of doing the same words incorrectly. Suspect, evening, science, private, retreat. Suspect, evening, science, private, retreat. Next, increase the difficulty again by working your way up to 3 syllables, then 4. After that, begin stringing words together. Early on, try using the name generator, synonym generator, or the food generator options for this part. As you transition into combining words, expect to make a few additional mistakes. This is normal, as the increased complexity can be distracting. The primary focus should remain on ensuring that every vowel is inflected correctly. That is the most important rule. The second priority is maintaining proper control of the ending of each word. Once this becomes easier, begin working your way up to phrases, then sentences. Finally, try using the motivational quotes generator, as these typically contain a higher word count. As you begin reading full paragraphs and longer paragraphs, a new rule should emerge, deciding which words should receive more time and emphasis and which should receive less. From a speaking and reading perspective, this is similar to the early preference for vowels over consonants. Smaller words that carry less meaning should be spoken more quickly, while words with greater meaning should be slowed down slightly. Not excessively, but just enough to suggest importance and gravitas. Okay, listen closely to the words I elongate and shorten to improve importance and gravitas. If you enter this world knowing you are loved, and you leave this world knowing the same, then everything that happens in between can be dealt with. Once your reading becomes consistent and you are no longer making mistakes with your inflections, in other words, once every vowel is being inflected correctly, your pitch is stabilized around a C4 central point, and your baseline voice is fully passing with no exceptions, it's time to assess your progress. To properly evaluate your voice, I recommend using the feedback system or asking friends to give you an honest assessment. Additionally, if you are a perfectionist, you may find it helpful to record yourself and analyze your own voice carefully, listening for any remaining imperfections. Once you are satisfied that you have taken your baseline voice as far as it can go, we're ready to move on to the next step, learning the tools that will allow you to take this new baseline feminine voice and shape it into your own personalized version.
I began to understand.
This path was always mine. I chose to follow it, even when it was difficult, because it was right.